Good afternoon. I'm Žantovský. Ambassadors, Your Excellencies, ladies and gentlemen, friends. For the last 7 years, it has been my honor and pleasure to open this conference on the occasion of the Václav Havel Human Prize. This year, my pleasure is even greater because this is the 10th consecutive year in which the Václav Havel Library, together with the Parliamentary Assembly of the Council of Europe and the Charta 77 Foundation, awarded the prize and held the conference. I hope you will understand when I say that sometimes I wish there were not so many excellent candidates for this award, for this could mean that the cause of human rights around the world has triumphed and the need for their advocacy and defense has receded. Alas, this is not the case, and maybe it will never be the case. As long as there are people struggling for their rights, there will always be others, be it governments, groups, or individuals, who will try to deny it to them. And worse than that, with the advent of new forms of illiberalism, nationalism, tyranny, and totalitarianism in recent years, the progress that has been achieved thanks to a generation of brave human rights defenders is in peril. The very concept of human rights, including such fundamental human rights as the right to life, right to dignity, freedom of expression, and freedom from oppression, is under attack. We are very proud to say that in the 10 years of the existence of the prize, we were able to honor and celebrate outstanding individuals and groups that symbolize the courage, dedication, and determination of all those who fight for human rights. In reality, we are something of trendsetters. Two of our laureates, Aleš Běliacký, our very first laureate, and Nadia Murad, received the Nobel Peace Prize after they received the Václav Havel Human Rights Prize. Others, such as Ilham Tohti, received the Andrei Sakharov Prize for Freedom of Thought, awarded by the European Parliament shortly after becoming our laureates. Other statistics, unfortunately, are not as heartwarming. Among all the risky professions, that of the human rights defender is the riskiest by far. All our laureates, with no exception, have been subject to persecution throughout their lives. 8 of the 9 laureates so far spent time in prison and detention, and at least 4 are in prison at this moment. The laureate of this year's prize is unfortunately no exception. As the President of the Parliamentary Assembly of the Council of Europe, Tim Cox, said at the ceremony in Strasbourg on Monday, we had a particularly difficult time in the selection panel to choose among the shortlisted candidates this year. The contribution of the Hungarian Rainbow Coalition Invalid campaign to the struggle for LGBTQIA+ rights, in particular in the successful opposition to the referendum that was intended to endorse the repressive legislation of the parliament, cannot be overestimated in the context of the struggle for the restoration of full political rights and civil freedoms in Hungary. The efforts of the Ukraine 5 AM coalition to uncover, document, and raise awareness of war crimes and crimes against humanity during the ongoing Russian invasion speak directly to the topic of this year's conference, the crime and the punishment. And the integrity and bravery of our laureate this year, Vladimir Kara-Murza, transcends the border of Russia and of the struggle for democracy there, to which he has been dedicated for most of his life. In 2017, he told another of our conferences in Prague, quote, "Domestic oppression is always followed by external aggression. We cannot expect that a state that violates the rights of its own citizens will respect the rights of others," unquote. In 2022, we can only regretfully recognize the wisdom of that statement. And this brings me to our topic today. The fight for human rights is inseparable from the fight for justice. And our belief in justice must be based on the conviction that all crimes, large or small, in peace or in war, whether committed by the powerless or the mighty, can eventually be brought to justice. This ideal is always just that, an ideal. And it is particularly hard to implement across the borders during the times of war and armed conflict, and to those who may feel they are shielded by power. But ever since the Nuremberg trials, the crimes known as the crimes of aggression, crimes against humanity, and crimes against peace are a part of the international law canon. Because the ultimate culprits in crimes against peace are usually states, difficult questions of establishing the jurisdiction and methods of keeping the record and enforcing justice arise. Various approaches and formats have been utilized with varying success, such as national and international tribunals, truth commissions, and memory institutions. What unifies all these efforts is the conviction that the record must be set straight and that justice be done both to the perpetrators and to the victims. The current horrendous Russian aggression against Ukraine must not be an exception. Already today, as the missiles are still falling on Ukrainian cities and as innocent civilians are being killed, it is incumbent on us to contemplate how to bring the perpetrators to justice from Vladimir Putin down. A large part of the next 4 hours will be dedicated to this joyless but necessary task. The recent events have also revived one of the most painful questions of the human condition. Is evil a construct we attribute to behavior for which there does not exist an adequate and acceptable social explanation? Or is the capacity for evil an integral and inseparable part of our existence? And if the latter, where do the roots and the triggers of evil come from? We cannot hope to answer this question in one afternoon, but we can at least look for some pointers in the third panel. This is not an academic exercise. This is an anguished search for answers while a part of Europe is burning. So thank you all for joining in. And thanks to all of our sponsors, the Secura Foundation that helps to fund this conference, the Vise 97 Foundation of Dagmar and Václav Havel, who let us use this spectacular place of Prague Crossroads, our media partners, the Czech TV, who stream it for us online, our interpreters, and my stellar team who did all the work while I'm just talking. Thank you. And now it is time for our keynote speaker, who unfortunately is so pressed for time that he could only join us online, and you will understand why. Karim A.A. Khan, Queen's Commissioner, is the prosecutor of the International Criminal Court. Mr. Khan is a barrister and King's Counsel with more than 25 years of professional experience as an international criminal law and human rights lawyer. He has extensive experience as a prosecutor, victims counsel, and defense lawyer in domestic and international criminal tribunals, including but not limited to the International Criminal Court, International Criminal Tribunal for Rwanda, International Tribunal for the former Yugoslavia, the extraordinary chambers in the courts of Cambodia, the Special Tribunal for Lebanon, and the Special Court for Sierra Leone. Quite a record. He has also represented victims of human rights violations in Africa and Asia. He has published a number of leading texts on international criminal law and is the co-author of Archbold International Criminal Courts, now in US 5th edition. Mr. Khan, the floor is yours. Thank you.
Well, thank you so much for the very kind introduction, and excellencies, ladies and gentlemen, finalists, and really the winner, and I'll come to that in a moment. It's really a privilege, and it's very humbling to be invited to say a few words on this very important occasion. There are many prizes for human rights and endeavor around the world, but the Václav Havel Prize is, if I may say so, appropriate and reflects the greatness of Václav Havel himself. We've already heard some of the very great citizens that have been awarded this prize in the past. And I think more than just a recognition, it is a sign that truth does not die. We are, as humanity, as Bernard Shaw said, the tragedy of man is he's a genius tethered to a dying animal. Our brothers and sisters around the world keep on working to pass a relay race in which the candle that the great Václav Havel, that the great Nelson Mandela, that the great Nadia Murad have carried and continue to carry will keep being passed, and indeed more candles will be lit that will light the way forward. And this is a candle that is not feeble. It is a candle that, however piercing the darkness, is resilient enough to withstand the adverse winds that continue to freeze the hearts and souls of lives of so many of our brothers and sisters around the world. So I think this is a tremendously important prize, a very tremendously important occasion, and it's a real pleasure to speak. I really commend the Václav Havel Library, Charter 77, and the other partners that have lent their name, but their moral authority, their financial support to holding high the common banner of legality, but also our shared humanity aloft in these very turbulent times. A special mention must, of course, be made of the winner of the prize tonight, the honorary Mr. Kara Murza. It must be a bittersweet moment to have recognition for a life of purpose, for sacrifice, and yet for loved ones to be pained at the pangs and the pains of separation. And as we survey the world at large, we see in so many parts of the world prisons of conscience, imprisoned because of their religion, imprisoned because their belief that the inalienable rights of humanity, man and woman, require respect and have a value that cannot be suffocated in a moment of despotism or oppression. The life of Václav Havel, of course, lights the way and is built upon the sacrifices and the heroes of the past. And it's only right to remember his words during his acceptance speech in July 1994, when he received the Philadelphia Liberty Medal. And I quote his wonderful and profound words, if I may. He stated that, and I quote, "The idea of human rights and freedoms must be an integral part of any meaningful world order." It's worth repeating. The idea of human rights and freedoms must be an integral part of any meaningful world order. It is born of a realization that human rights are not an appendage mechanically bolted on to the progress of humanity, to peace and security, to progress, to economic prosperity, to civil, political, cultural, economic rights. But for us to fulfill our own destiny as a species, for us to protect the planet, for us to be architects of a more civilized, more refined, and less nasty and brutish world, human rights needs to be engineered into the conversation right at the outset, when it comes to policy, when it comes to actions by states, when it comes to how we interact with our colleagues in the workplace, our families in the home, our mutual respect, divided not by religion or color or creed or political differences or by orientation, but united by our shared humanity. These are, on one level, simple concepts, but they go to the heart of what it is, in my respectful view, of what it is to be human. And I think that catalyst of change, the catalyst of hope that we saw in the 1990s, which we thought ushered in a new dawn of turning swords into plowshares, of unity, of an effective Security Council, of really a moment when the age of man, the age of woman, the age of reason would triumph over the brutish natures of humanity. But for that to progress, we need a further awakening in terms of the utility of the rule of law. Despair and despondency are the friend to tyrants and those that want to tear up what binds us together. And I'm not talking about the need for naive hope, but hope is absolutely essential, because when we think we are spectators in the stories of our own lives, we give space to those that grab what they can get and push under the water those that they seek to drown and keep in the darkness. In the very difficult moments that the world is in, where it seems the rule of law is speaking in the face of a hurricane and is not penetrating beyond our lips, it's important to look at things from a different perspective. Within 48 hours of my request for states to refer the situation of Ukraine, 39 states answered the call. 43 states now, 1/3 of all state parties who are bound by the Rome Statute, sought to come together to say that the rule of law is not absent from the battlefield, but rather that a new common front of legality has to apply in the Ukraine, as it needs to apply better and more effectively in Sudan, in Libya, for the Rohingya, and in many other parts of the world. A realization in this dire moment, when talk of tactical nuclear weapons are mentioned in the major capitals of the world, a realization that the law can actually play a role in protecting and ensuring constraints on what could otherwise be unlimited warfare. But it requires partnerships. It's too important. The law of human rights is too important to leave to the judges. It's too important to leave to prosecutors like me, or lawyers, or defense counsel, or government, or even civil societies. It requires every single person to be engaged. And what we are seeing in this moment is a new potential coming together, working with the OSCE, with the commissions of inquiry, with the United Nations, with civil society, with everybody that we can, based upon these core principles. I have been to Ukraine 3 times. My team is there now. Like many civilians, they've been in bunkers as recent missiles have hurtled towards Kyiv and many other towns in Ukraine. But we need to show collectively the stamina to speak the truth and find the truth. That engages each and every individual, and all the nominees today from the Rainbow Coalition and the other organizations deserve particular thanks and really applause, including the Invalid campaign. But I want to say a word, if I may, also about the Ukraine 5 a.m. coalition. I've had the opportunity in my office of working with them. Civil society has an important role to play. That's also clearly part of the legacy of Václav Havel. And we have engaged with the 5 a.m. coalition, and we produced just a few days ago, we released along with Eurojust a guidebook and guidelines on how to collect evidence better, basic standards, so that we can make the best use of all the tools out there, the work of civil society and their courage, as well as with state parties and national prosecuting authorities. So in this moment, I may, if I can, end with another quote of the great Václav Havel. And he stated, and I quote, that the salvation of this human world lies nowhere else than in the human heart, in the human power to reflect, in human meekness, and in human responsibility. I think the great man's words, like I did before, deserve to be repeated, because they're much more profound than anything I can conjure up. The salvation of this human world lies nowhere else than in the human heart, in the human power to reflect, in human meekness, and in human responsibility. The quest for human rights is not territorial. It is not confined to Ukrainians. It does not stop at national boundaries. It embraces all of us. Every life matters equally. We have people in Sudan, we have people in Darfur, in Libya, the Rohingya, in so many parts of the world who shed tears in silence, invisible from the cameras. We need to enliven the law. We need to put the law where it is needed most to protect the most vulnerable. As I said at the outset, this requires you, those at this important event in Prague today, and all of us to recommit ourselves with the hope, with the learning, the teachings, the guidance, an example of the great Václav Havel and the current winner that we honor today. Thank you so much for the opportunity to say a few words.